Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, teaming up with SG1 Sports to bring you the most comprehensive coverage of college football with the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the nation that you'll find online. Today, we've got special guest in Gerry Dinardo from the Big Ten Network to talk up, not the Big 12, the SEC, the Big Ten, of course. So, Gerry, we appreciate you stopping back.
Well, good to be with you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. So everybody talks about the Big Ten East, and I know the top half of the division is the very best in college football. Most people would agree, but I'm going to go to the West because I'm very intrigued with the Purdue Boilermakers gaining a lot of attention coming off just an outstanding performance last year. Jeff Brom taking the reins there. People think of Jeff Brom throwing the football all over the place, but it was really the defensive improvement that led this surge. They actually just signed a tight end out of Virginia just a couple minutes ago. So he's just got this program moving in the right direction.
You know, Mark, it's interesting. Last year at Media Days, obviously we meet with all 14 coaches. And when Jeff came to the set, we obviously talked the normal stuff, but he made a point. He says, guys, we're going to be a lot better on defense than people think. And since that meeting, I always thought that was really interesting. And this just tells you a little bit about what kind of coach he is, how good he is. And so that's how the season unfolded. He's an offensive guru and all that. And all that's true. But unlike an offensive coordinator who's not the head coach, just do what you want on offense, regardless of what you do to your defense, is not good strategy for a head coach. So he called, game plan, did everything on offense last year, not necessarily to be explosive, but to be as efficient as possible and keep the defense in good position to win the game. Now, they won't be as good on defense this year, so maybe we'll see a little bit more offense, but for a lot of reasons, I thought he did an incredible job last year.
And that's sometimes maybe what's the typical reaction from college football fans. Somebody like that hits the scene, much is expected, or there's hope that a lot can be expected. They jump up to win a bowl game and win 7 games, and then it's just assumed that it's just going to continue from there. But to continue that progress, you the road ahead is to beat a lot better teams with more talent.
Yeah, and here's the other thing, Mark. The second year of a program bring on some problems that everybody has and some specific problems. Jeff's specific problems year 2 will be he won't be as good on defense. I mean, very rarely do you inherit a program after a coach gets fired and have the kind of talent he had on defense. So it was unusual circumstances to begin with. So he loses a lot of defensive talent. But, Mark, here's something else to think about. Let me tell you from personal experience some of the things that you deal with the second year that you didn't have to deal with the first year. First year, as you know, everyone's excited about the program, right? Every single player, every single fan. It's only in year 2 when some of the players say, you know what, I didn't fit in the last guy's plans, and after being with this guy for 2 years, I'm not sure I fit in his plans either. So you're going to have a morale problem, not a major morale problem, but you have to deal with a group of players that say, darn, this is hopeless for me now. And you don't have to deal with that in the first year because there's always hope for the future. So it's one of those growing pains that a program will go through. I would think Jeff will go through that. Plus, he'll go through growing pains that his defense won't be as good.
We're glad to be joined by Gerry Dinardo from the Big Ten Network. He kind of knows what he's talking about, having taken over programs, of course, one in the Big Ten at Indiana, then LSU and Vanderbilt out of the SEC. So we're going to talk about a coach that doesn't have to deal with those problems this year. We may have a different conversation next year, and that's, of course, Scott Frost at Nebraska. So here's a guy that comes back home, considering the situation and what he was able to achieve at Central Florida, which was remarkable. I think what gets lost in this is that he inherits a roster. Now, I know not all these guys are still on the roster, but inherits a roster with 4 recruiting classes, all ranked either 4th or 5th in the Big Ten and top 25 in the nation.
Yeah, but his roster needs to improve because of the expectations at Nebraska. I've always felt since Nebraska joined the conference and we went to divisions that they should be in the West Division hunt to the last week of the season. I think that's a minimum expectation. I'm not maybe saying this year for Scott Frost, but the big picture, Mark, and I've said this, and I think I've said it to Scott because I had a chance to visit with him. All you have to do is look to Ann Arbor. And here's why. 2 ex-quarterbacks taking over their program when their program had more resources than everybody else that they were playing. It wasn't as competitive. In other words, when Scott played for Tom Osborne, when Jim played for Bo, you know, those coaches could have switched sidelines and Nebraska and Michigan would have still won, right? Because they had so much more talent and better resources. Nowadays, okay, you just don't walk into a historic winning program and win all of a sudden. That's why James Franklin has done an incredible job at Penn State. It's not automatic that the ex-quarterback comes back, and it was like it was when he played quarterback. The world used to be flat, now it's round. I think the world of Scott, I think it's a great hire, but I just word of caution to the Nebraska fans. You know, this is tougher than it's ever been. Tougher than it has ever been to be successful at these historic programs.
Yeah, and tough because they're isolated from the elite talent across the country.
Correct.
All right, let's look
but Mark, the new rules do help them. You know, the early signing date, the junior visitation. Yep. In fact, Sean Eichhorst, before they fired him as the athletic director of Nebraska, he spearheaded that legislation change because the junior visitation and early signing is a windfall for Nebraska, and I make the case more of a windfall than Nebraska than any other school in the country, not in the Big Ten. Any other school in the country, the new rule will help Nebraska live up to their historic expectations.
We'll slide to the other end of the spectrum in regards to historical expectations in Northwestern. But of course, this is not the Northwestern that I grew up with under Dennis Green, not winning football games for years. But it's just a fine program that Pat Fitzgerald has probably squeezed as much potential out of it as possible. Now they've got new facilities on the horizon. They've got Hunter Johnson, a 5-star quarterback, coming next fall. And hopefully Clayton Thorson's ready to go this fall, and it's a really good football program.
Yes, but Mark, Coach Walker and Coach Barnett, the 2 predecessors, have won the Big Ten championship.
True.
So, yes, so Pat has brought stability. Pat has brought consistency, but he took over a program that had won 2 Big Ten championships in more difficult environment than just winning the West and getting to Indianapolis. And you know, don't take this the wrong way. I think they've done a terrific job. But, you know, in a lot of places, that's not good enough if you've taken over for 2 consecutive coaches that won a Big Ten championship. And so I think that's where they are. I think they're in a position, new facilities, a 12, 15-year reign of a head coach, whatever Pat's been there, probably the winningest coach in Northwestern's history, the time he's done, if he isn't already there, and I think he may. But you have to win the West. I mean, the 2 predecessors won the whole thing.
It is a good point. Of course, Gary Barnett, with that miracle run in 1995, Ohio State looked to be the best team in the country, and he was able to get to the Rose Bowl. And, of course, Walker in 2000, and a number of teams tied that year in winning the Big Ten championship. So, yeah, Pat Fitzgerald doing a nice job. And in Northwestern, it's just funny to watch the results of their games and the way they play, because you can still tell the talented difference against the elite teams. They have to have it buttoned up. They have to be on their A game, because even during this nice run, if they're back to a C+ game, they're getting annihilated by a Michigan or Tennessee or somebody like that.
Yes, I would agree with that. But they're also, after Pat's been there long enough, they should be better than Illinois. They should be better than Minnesota. They should be better than Purdue. They've had a lot of success against Nebraska, and that's to Pat and Northwestern's credit. So you know, they've hung in there. Their crossover East games have not been, you know, all that difficult. You look at Nebraska's crossover games this year. It's at Michigan, at Ohio State, and Michigan State at home. I mean, you talk about tough crossovers. You know, Northwestern doesn't have that, but Nebraska does.
Yeah, so let's switch to a school that is on the threshold of elite status in college football. and they impress me outside of the service academies. What they've accomplished in the last 20 or 25 years is likened to what Michigan State's done under Mark D'Antonio in the last 10 years, with top 30 to 40 recruiting classes producing top 10 teams. And that's, of course, Wisconsin. And I think the big distinction that they may have this year over previous teams is the playmaking ability on the outside that they now have. The defense may not be quite as good. And Alex Hornibrook, if he can capture what he performed at the Orange Bowl against a very good defense and secondary, wow, sky's the limit.
Yeah, well, you summed it up. I mean, I think your analysis is exactly right. You know, they won't be as good on defense. They should be better on offense. You know, everyone talks about their offensive line being back. You know, I did a little piece on BTN Twitter a couple weeks ago, you know, saying that I thought they could be as explosive on offense as any team in the country, even though they lined up in the traditional pro formation. And it was for all the reasons that you mentioned, the offensive line, Alex Hornibrook. You know, they've got guys on the flank now. I mean, they really can be explosive, which is hard to do from that formation in nowadays football. But, you know, their defense won't be as good. And I have to tell you, Mark, that, you know, what were they last year? 13-1 or 12-1? 13-1, I guess. You know, it's still 18 to 22-year-olds, and it's still complacency, and it's still, you know, did I invent the game, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And no one is immune to that. Chris is one of my favorite guys. That's one of my favorite programs. But I know what it's dealing with young guys on campus. It's a challenge to keep them humble and happy.
And that's an interesting point you bring up, because I think when it comes to complacency, we think of ultra talented programs like a Florida State could get complacent if they're not having the kind of season that they expect. But we just expect guys at Wisconsin to be down and dirty and grinding regardless. And you don't need to motivate those guys. They're bred the right way, and they just know nothing but lining up and playing hard. But that's not necessarily the case. Nobody's
immune to human nature, right? I mean, it strikes everybody. Maybe it takes longer to get to Madison. Remember, I was at the Orange Bowl. I mean, they beat what you could consider a more talented Miami team. Yeah. So that even boosts them more, right? I mean, their personality is not Miami-like, and yet they beat Miami. And you're telling me that they aren't all of a sudden thinking, darn, we're pretty good. You know, we're pretty good. You know, I mean, yeah, we'll work. I mean, nobody's immune to this issue.
So we get the one team in the West, Gerry, that's the obvious choice most years to challenge Wisconsin. That's, of course, Iowa. They lose three of the best players in the conference, and Wadley, Jewell, and Josh Jackson at corner. Nathan Stanley comes back with 26 touchdown passes, only against 6 picks. So I see huge minuses in personnel losses. The linebacking corps got ravaged, but I see huge pluses with Stanley. Noah Fant might be the best tight end in the nation. And no Ohio State, Michigan State on the schedule. Wisconsin, Nebraska, Northwestern, all at home.
Yeah, the intriguing thing for me, Mark, with this team is, and I really don't have a good handle. I'd be lying if I told you I did. I think about them a lot in my daily work. It's hard to get a handle on them, and the only thing I think I could add to the conversation, because I really don't know enough about them, and it's always hard to figure them and Northwestern out, so this isn't unusual. But Brian Ferentz, offensive coordinator, I keep going back to his experiences with the Patriots and how they, and I'm not a pro football fan, but a little bit I know, how they have evolved offensively based on Tom Brady. And you look at their offensive line this year, that it's not as good as it's been, but their quarterback's a veteran guy with a big arm. I just don't know if we're going to see them line up in the pro formation down after down after down. I am very, very curious, just from a science point of view, which I love about the game, if they're going to evolve a little bit to some spread principles. Not because the I formation is old-fashioned, not because it's not part of Iowa's culture. This isn't a value decision that you can't win in that offense. They obviously scored a ton of points in Ohio State last year. So just based on their personnel, not as good in the offensive line, a really good quarterback, probably the best talent they've had on the flank. I'm dying to see if they evolve. And we'll be there in August at camp. I imagine they won't show us anything if they are evolving, but I can't wait to see it unfold during the year.
Yeah, and their slot receiver, Nick Easley's back. He's one of the best
Right.
around.
Right.
And they have maybe under the radar, everybody thinks offensive line. They've been producing defensive ends like nobody's business. And they've got some really good ones coming back as well there. I'm going to clump the entire Eastern Division and let you sort it out. Ohio State's got the best roster, maybe in the country, one of the top 3 rosters in the country. Penn State's got the best quarterback coming back, and they've recruited exceptionally well. Michigan State brings back more returning starters than anyone, but Michigan fascinates me because of the talent on the roster, the coach situation, at least public perception-wise, and then, of course, Shea Patterson taking over at quarterback.
Okay, let me slow you down a little bit on the talent at Michigan. Okay. And here's some things to think about when it comes to talent. Last year, they had 4 first-team All-Big Ten defenders. They had none on offense. They recruited, or Shea Patterson transferred there. If you watch the Ole Miss film, he is crazy good from the spread formation. I've seen some magazines this summer. They don't have their offensive line rated in the top 25 in the country. So now let's talk personnel. So their defense is high pressured, okay, talented, draft picks, and yet their offensive line isn't rated in the top 25 by some magazines. They've been lining up in pro formation. If you want to nullify Shea Patterson's talent, let's do this. Put him underneath the center and let the defense have pursuit and contain angles on him every snap. If you want to be creative, line him up in the spread, because when he breaks contain, he is crazy good running and he's crazy good passing, and you can hardly contain him. So the most intriguing thing, other than the obvious storylines that the Michigan talent hasn't really closed the gap to the Ohio State talent since Jim has been there, the most intriguing story to me is the science of the game. Are they really going to line Shea Patterson up in the underneath the center in a pro formation with an average offensive line? I mean, people went to the spread because the people that were available in high school recruiting were these dual threat quarterbacks. And because if you couldn't recruit the best offensive line in the country, like Wisconsin and Ohio State and so on and so forth, you got in the spread. It's the modern day wishbone. So are you going to recruit a wishbone quarterback and then ask him to throw the ball? That's what it would be like if you recruit Shea Patterson and ask him to be a pro formation quarterback. So to me, Mark, that's the big story about Michigan. What do they look like offensively?
I would think possibly, Gerry, that Jim Harbaugh would have some concepts in his back pocket from his days with Colin Kaepernick that might apply.
Oh, there's no doubt. Now, whether he puts his hands in his pocket or not and pulls something out, I mean, because that, sometimes coaches get in this box where I'll show you. What do you mean I can't run the pro formation? You remember me at Stanford? You say, remember with Kaepernick? He might say, remember me at Stanford? Mm-hmm. But Stanford wasn't playing Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan State. It was a little different at Stanford. You could line up in a phone booth and win some games. I don't know that they can do that in the Big Ten East. But I go back to personnel more than anything. If you recruit a square peg, give them a square hole. Don't recruit a square peg and give him a round hole. I mean, let this kid run. Let this kid move. And I'm not saying he's an option quarterback, but he's dangerous in both the run and the pass on the move. And you can't put a quarterback underneath center, have him drop back 7 yards, and then put him on the move. The defense already has the contain angles on him.
Yeah, he looks like Russell Wilson out there. He can do both.
Right, no doubt.
Ohio State, best talent in the nation, that's arguably a statement there, but best in the Big Ten. Dwayne Haskins back at quarterback. What he showed us in the fourth quarter in the second half against Michigan obviously gives hope, but they've got a small path in regards to the expectations. They basically can't lose or maybe lose one game, but Urban Meyer's expected to get to the college football playoff. Yeah,
that's the box they're in. And I'm familiar with that box. When I played at Notre Dame, obviously an independent, it was big. It was national championship or bust. And prior to modern day college football, you were pretty proud of a conference championship and a conference championship ring. Nowadays, places like Ohio State, Alabama, wherever you want to put on the list, it really is national championship or bust, and you summarized it accurately. That's the world that Urban lives in. He does a good job of coaching his guys not to have that mentality until it's a reality. He talks a lot about the East. He talks a lot about let's win the Big Ten championship, and everything else will take care of itself. So there's a whole psychology, which Urban is one of the best around in. There's a whole psychology of coaching a team that everyone expects them to win the national championship every year. It's very, very difficult. It's a good problem that you and I would like to have, perhaps, but it's certainly a challenge.
Yeah, it's unfortunate to hear a coach like Urban Meyer, and there are just a few other coaches that face this, that talks after a big win against a very good USC team in a Cotton Bowl, and he's got to preach the accomplishments of his team and almost try to convince the nation when he shouldn't have to. He won maybe the best conference in the country, regardless of how you rate the Big Ten. He won a conference championship, and it's a playoff selection. It's not necessarily a playoff in the truest sense of the form of an objective system. It's a selection. They were not selected. He can't control that portion of it.
Right. I mean, I can remember when Michigan State went to the playoffs 4 years ago, 5 years, whatever it was. They played Alabama. And, of course, Mark worked for Nick. And Mark D'Antonio was an incredible upbeat guy. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. He's just a fabulous guy. And he lost that game pretty bad. It was a shutout, if I remember right. And he was gracious enough to come to our desk after the game, which a lot of coaches wouldn't have done in his situation, just to tell you what kind of person he is. But I've never seen him so down. And off the air, I said, Coach, you won the Big Ten championship. My God. And I felt so bad for him because ordinarily he'd be saying that, but, even he felt that pressure, winning the Big Ten championship, losing to an Alabama team that I think won the national championship that year. Mm-hmm. And his dauber was down, which I very rarely see.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. We've got this gold medal perception, especially in this country. You win the silver, you win the bronze. We're not really paying attention to you, and it's just unfortunate these kids work too hard. All right, Michigan State, Penn State, I'll just leave those out there just to kind of give us keys on what's going to make or break their seasons.
Well, Penn State, Ricky Ronnie takes over offense, so it'll be interesting. Joe Moorhead was a terrific play caller. I'm a big James Franklin fan. I think he's done extraordinary things at Penn State. I think he is unfairly portrayed as a recruiter. I think he's the complete package. I think he can recruit, and I think he can coach. But to me, the offense, how the offense gets tweaked under Ricky. Michigan State, for me, marks a little bit like Iowa. I mean, on paper, in the magazines and all that stuff, I mean, they sure predict to be good. Their offensive line probably, they have a lot of guys, a lot of starters, a lot of playing time there, but I'm not sure people think they're maybe not the best in the conference. Their defense should be solid. They have some coaching changes as well. So they're a little bit mysterious for me as well. So, Mark always has them ready. He talked about flipping it last year, winning 3 games and then winning 9 and then 10 in the bowl game. So I'm a little uncertain about the Michigan State team this year. I really need to see him in camp first.
Gerry Dinardo joining us from the Big Ten Network, breaking down the contenders in the East and the West. If you're jumping on late to the live stream, you just wait for the video to post and you can go back and catch the entire thing. Gerry, we would love to talk Big Ten football all day with you. I know you've got a ton going on. Maryland's intriguing down the line as well. We appreciate your time, sir.
Well, thanks, Mark. I appreciate talking college football this time of year with you. And, always enjoy it. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Mark.
Gerry Dinardo from the Big Ten Network joining us to break down the conference, both the East and West divisions. I find it extremely fascinating. We weren't able to connect with Gerry via the YouTube live video stream, but we got him on the phone and did the next best thing, and appreciate your comments. He was short on time. He had about 15 minutes. So I just wanted to make sure that I got a capsule look at each and every contender in the Big Ten. He seems to be a little tempered on Purdue's rise, understanding that Jeff Brom's doing an excellent job, but they had personnel losses on defense where the big improvement was last year. Nebraska, he's holding off on expecting way too much out of the Huskers as well because of what he cited there. It's interesting because everybody's patting Pat Fitzgerald on the back for what he's accomplished at Northwestern, which I think is more consistent and more stable over a period of years than what his predecessors accomplished. But with Pat Fitzgerald, true, as Gerry points out, he has yet to win a Big Ten championship or even a division championship, while both Barnett and Patterson were able to accomplish that despite the limitations academically and in terms of facilities and resources in Evanston, Illinois. Gerry's very high on Wisconsin. I am as well. I don't believe that the defense is going to be quite at the level that they were last year. And I think we also have to understand that some of the defensive statistics that we review really favor Wisconsin, considering what the schedule was not last year. And it was not daunting without Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State during the regular season. Of course, the Buckeyes played the Badgers in the Big Ten championship game, but the standard defensive metrics of points per game, yards allowed per game skewed in Wisconsin's favor because of the schedule and the weakness of some of the offenses, most of the offenses in the Western Division. But he's high on Wisconsin. I am as well. It's just going to be a more dynamic offense than maybe anything we've seen at Wisconsin. They've typically had, think Jared Abbrederis at wide receiver, one guy. They've got multiple guys right now that in Davis and Taylor and some others that can stretch the field and open up the running game for one Jonathan Taylor, who's possibly ready to make a Heisman run after running for roughly 2,000 yards or just shy of it last year. Iowa's enigmatic, possibly, because the pluses are magnified. Nathan Stanley, a quarterback, 26 touchdowns, 6 picks last year. The defensive end play is exceptional. The offensive line should be really good, but they lost their center, James Daniels, a pretty high pick in the NFL draft, who was their leader and line caller at center. They lose him, but they bring back a wealth on D. And Josie Jewell. Josie Jewell lost. Josh Jackson, 8 interceptions to lead the nation, lost. Josie Jewell taken by the Broncos late in the NFL draft. Josh Jackson, a 2nd or 3rd round pick in the NFL draft. Akram Wadley, they're all everything back. A guy that could get you some tough yards in the middle, but mostly on the perimeter and mostly as a receiver out of the backfield. A dynamic back, in my opinion, last year, only second to Saquon Barkley. J.K. Dobbins' side worked with a better offensive line and scheme that helped him out. Akram Wadley had more on his back, more responsibility, more relied upon him than other backs, J.K. Dobbins included, in the Big Ten, and they're going to miss him, and they miss his backup, the Nevada transfer, his James Butler. His name almost escaped my mind, but not quite. So Iowa loses their 2 running backs, Josie Jewell at linebacker, and the entire linebacking crew. So that shouldn't be discarded as they replace those guys with all special teamers. So there's negative there for Iowa, but they bring back one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten, the best tight end in the Big Ten in Noah Fant. They bring back Hess and Spencer and Epinesa at defensive end, all excellent players. The secondary, besides the loss of Josh Jackson, should be really good. And the schedule lines up for the Hawkeyes here with no Ohio State, no Michigan State. And considering what they did to the Buckeyes last year, maybe they wouldn't mind playing the Buckeyes again. But I think that was a bit of an aberration. No Ohio State, Michigan State for Iowa. They do have to travel to Happy Valley. And then in division, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Nebraska, all at home. And then we talked up the Big Ten Eastern Division, and no big surprise there. But Gerry gave us a great insight into the Michigan offensive scheme, where they've been lacking at the offensive line and in some of the concepts and the decisions that they need to make concerning what to do with Shea Patterson. Yes, it's a godsend to a team that's been lacking quarterback play. And let's not forget, offensive line play at Michigan has been something that Jim Harbaugh has not been able to fix since he arrived on campus. He inherited talent on defense. He maximized the talent along with, of course, his defensive coaching staff, and they even got better on defense. Last year, he lost a wealth of talent on defense and still played one of the 10 best defensive efforts in the nation, especially considering that the offense continued the 3-and-outs and the bad field position. But Shea Patterson at quarterback, and what Harbaugh and staff decide to do with him is going to be crucial there. Ohio State's almost a given. They have some issues to clear up at safety, where they've got a number of talented players. So they've got no dearth of talent anywhere on the roster. So plenty of talented safety for the Buckeyes, but have to figure out who's going to play opposite Jordan Fuller. The linebacking core has probably been the weakest link for the Buckeyes during this non-national championship run that's just been so horrible in losing 1, 2, and 2 games the last 3 years. But the linebacking core has been decent, but decent's not good enough. They need an upgrade there. And, of course, they've got all the wide receivers back, the running backs back, and Dwayne Haskins, in many people's estimation, will be an upgrade over J.T. Barrett. But let's not discount, and J.T. Barrett, one of the more maligned players that's accomplished so much in college football in recent years, let's not discount what J.T. Barrett accomplished and what he did bring to the table in regards to leadership and taking care of the football, not necessarily making big plays through the passing game on a regular basis. He failed there after 2014 for some reason, unknown reason, because if you watch the kid play in 2014, specifically look at the Michigan State game, a game that I caught on the Big Ten Network actually just last week. I watched about half the 2014 Ohio State-Michigan State game where the Buckeyes threw up 49 on Sparty, a really good Spartans defense that a team that finished in the top 10 in the country, and J.T. Barrett was throwing the long ball. He lost those guys, and maybe the shoulder injury was worse than we had thought. Penn State loses defensive personnel, of course, the best back in the nation, and they've got Trace McSorley back in the running. He loses his security blanket in Mike Gesicki. The recruiting has been top-notch at Penn State. And then, of course, we discussed Mark D'Antonio and his work at Michigan State. And the Spartans probably not recruiting the kind of talent, definitely not recruiting the type of talent that the other 3 schools are. But, of course, they've got a wealth of experience coming back. But Gerry Dinardo giving us his warning about Michigan State maybe being projected a bit too high by a lot of the national pundits. We have the live chat up. I'll see if anything interesting is here. I was checking it during the conversation with Gerry Dinardo, but again, he was limited on time. I will ask you guys if you have any interest in going to a phone line where I would take calls. So I think that might be a good option to go to. I've always thought that the most fun job that I could ever have is doing all this, but included in that would be taking phone calls on a college football show and hearing from you guys. So, yeah, Gerry Dinardo, very appreciative of him coming on to talk Big Ten football. I knew that the chat line would be a little bit sparse considering it's the middle of the day. We do much better at night, but of course, Gerry Dinardo had to grab him when I could get him. So we'll see if we've got anything on the line. It looked like you guys wanted some Illinois talk. So maybe we'll bring on Gerry to clean up the Big Ten and some of those teams that we did not address. PJ Fleck at Minnesota coming off 2-7 in the conference and expected to do much better, of course. And the recruiting has been really good at Minnesota. Then, of course, you guys are mentioning Illinois. They're recruiting better. Maryland better than all the second tier, third tier teams in the Big Ten under DJ Durkin. Indiana and Rutgers appears to be the worst team in the Big Ten. Rutgers or Illinois. Much talk here about Illinois and Rutgers. Much talk here about Lovie Smith and what he accomplished in the NFL, of course, at Tampa Bay and taking the Chicago Bears to the Super Bowl against Peyton Manning and the Colts. What was that now? 12 years ago. Wow. In the rain in Jacksonville. All right. Anything else here? You guys are talking about, Lovie Smith. For anybody on the chat or watching the record that has not caught some of our recent video posts and live streams with some great rivalry discussion. Miami versus Florida State last night. The previous night, it was Florida State. And, of course, we've talked Ohio State, Michigan, USC, UCLA, Kentucky, Tennessee, Clemson, Florida State, and hope to get a few more of those together. I was hoping just to be able to scan the nation and just bring in everyone and really break down just any conceivable rivalry out there during rivalry month here in June. But those are difficult to schedule. I've got to get myself and two others together to get those done. But a whole lot of fun last night, again, with Florida State, Miami, Cam Underwood, and James Coleman getting after each other for an hour and 45 minutes. It was fun. It was great discussion. I just kicked back and let those guys go at it. All right. Also want to mention that we've got some videos that we're going to be posting over at SG1 Sports, so please check them out for their college football coverage. They do a little bit different than I do, but certainly they had reached out to me to supply them with some content, and I'm happy to do so because they certainly have a different audience than I. For anyone out there who is subscribed, that would be the word subscribe to Alonzo1219. He's one of our Miami contributors, Alonzo1219. If you're a subscriber to Alonzo, then you are automatically eligible for a contest in which he's going to be giving away some swag, whether that's t-shirt, hat, or a fancy chains turnover chain. But if you are not a Miami fan, he has promised to meet your college football or sports needs, so he can come up with the swag for a number of programs. So if you're not necessarily a Miami fan, you still subscribe to Alonzo1219. Then you bring as many subscribers as you can to Mark Rogers TV before July 15th. On July 15th, I will be determining who has brought the most subscribers to my channel. And the way I will determine that is for those new subscribers, they need to alert me of the name of the subscriber who brought them my way. So if you can follow all that, subscribe to Alonzo1219, then have your family, your friends, your acquaintances who love college football to subscribe to Mark Rogers TV, and then have them drop your name so we can count them up. And the individual who has brought more subscribers to Mark Rogers TV than anyone else before July 15th, from June 15th to July 15th, will win some swag from Alonzo1219. And if you need to hear a testimonial in that direction, you go to 19 Savage, our Texas guy, who's all over these shows and who I believe won some swag with Alonzo1219 for his Texas wardrobe. And he's off to a good start bringing me some subscribers as well. So I hate to get on here and beg for subscribers, but I want to keep this thing going, and I want it to be as big and as good as it possibly can be. And I'm proud of the work that we do in not necessarily bringing you great graphics, fancy full screens, a tremendous set, or a professional look at this point, but the best college football discussion, debate, and analysis that you will find anywhere. I have worked on my top 10 non-conference games for 2018. You will see that soon right here at Mark Rogers TV. My top 10 non-conference games. Also working on a look at the LSU quarterback situation now that Joe Burrow is in the mix for the battle with Miles Brennan and Justin McMillan. All right, folks, anything else that you guys would like to discuss concerning college football? I'm certainly willing and able to hang on here and discuss the game that we love. I thought it to be a great conversation last week with Steve Dace, Michigan Podcast. He came on and we discussed what he has calculated to be the top 25 programs over the last 25 years. So 1992 through 2017, the top 25 college football programs of the last 25 years. So check out that video. If you have any suggestions for the channel, because there's certainly things that I'm probably missing in regards to what I could do better, whether that's content or notifications. Somebody contacted me earlier today to let me know I wanted to see the Miami-Florida State talk, and I had no idea it was coming up. Yep. I'm busy. I dropped the ball, and I didn't send out a notification until we actually came online for that. So my intent is that every morning that I would send out some type of, at very least, send out notifications for the lineup that I have that night. And then possibly, if I have a chance to jump online really quick, knock out a promo video to explain who's coming up on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, later that day, so you guys know what's going on, know what the schedule is. You can also follow me at Mark Rogers TV on Facebook and on Twitter, and I try to get the word out there as well. But I need to get into the habit of first thing in the morning, and unfortunately, with my work schedule, my first thing in the morning is something different every day. If it was 7 o'clock every day, 7 o'clock in the morning, then bam, I would get into the habit of doing that. But unfortunately, it's working till 5 in the morning, 2 in the morning, working a day shift. It's all over the place. So it's difficult to get into the habit. But I want to keep you guys as updated as possible. Steve Merrill from Pro Sports Info, he's a Vegas handicapper and odds maker. He was scheduled to join us today at 3 o'clock Eastern time. He has some scheduling conflicts. I don't know if I'm going to be able to catch up with Steve today, unfortunately, because we were going to talk Heisman odds and national championship odds, but we may be able to knock that out. Hoping to have Uncle Lou on Sunday at 4 o'clock. So Lou said he was clear for Sunday. I threw out 4 o'clock Eastern time. Lou has yet to get back to me. So Uncle Lou, Mark Rogers TV, going face-to-face, and that should be a whole lot of fun, hopefully on Sunday. Again, I'm trying to cover all of college football. I would love to get on here, believe it or not, for as painful as this sounds, and talk Kansas, talk Oregon State, bring on Virginia contributors and Syracuse. We do. John Casillo, Noon's Magician, SB Nation. That's how much I love college football. I would love to talk about everyone. Of course, the time is limited for a number of reasons. Therefore, what I do is obviously focus on the teams that matter, the contenders, and the storylines that matter. Something else that I would like to focus on that I talked with SG1 Sports about, they actually approached me, was about instant analysis. There's a player suspension, there's a coach's firing, whatever the breaking news is, and being able to jump on that as soon as possible. I was able to do that reasonably quick after the Hunter Johnson signing with Northwestern the other day, and then the West Virginia defensive lineman who signed with Florida, able to give some analysis on that pretty quickly within 12 hours or so, but would like to get that on right after that news breaks. All right, I'm going to scan the chat. 70-14. Woo! What game was that? 62-24. Yeah, 62-24. That one I do remember. Osborne destroyed Spurrier's team. Yes, we do remember that from 1995. Mark, what happens when Michigan comes out and destroys Notre Dame opening weekend? Gonna happen. So Iron Cross, you look like you're a Saints fan. Iron Cross, you're a Michigan fan. So obviously you're a Michigan fan and looking for a big win in South Bend in week 1. So I produced a video No, you know what? This is the video that's coming up because I was thinking back that I took some notes, and actually my projection right now is Michigan to win that game in South Bend by 4 points. So I'll go along with that. Destroying might be a little bit strong. The Irish are good. They're a top 10 to 15 team. Conference USA 2012 championship. What is the biggest game I've been to? Oh, this is a great question. 19 Savage coming up with a horn. So I don't know if how many times I've shared this synopsis of my career. So I'll slice it down to when I covered the SEC on the sidelines. So this was from 1994 to 2000 that I covered the SEC, most specifically Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Alabama for WCBI in Mississippi. So I was about 25 minutes from the Mississippi State campus, 2 or 3 hours from Ole Miss, but because of our coverage area, they were just as important to cover. And then Alabama was only an hour away. So I was going to their games every weekend. So let's see what comes to mind in football. 1994, went to and covered the SEC championship game, Alabama, Florida. Alabama was undefeated, of course, gunning for a national championship. Gators won 24-23. So that was a huge game in 94 that comes to mind. I actually was covering Peyton Manning's first game action at Mississippi State in Starkville. And I've seen this on YouTube where Peyton Manning threw his first collegiate touchdown against Mississippi State, which actually, I'll give it about a 90% certainty that it was his first collegiate touchdown pass. It was his first collegiate win, and he pulled the game out in relief of Heath Shuler. No, not Heath Shuler. Todd Helton at Tennessee. Peyton Manning rolled out, hit the tight end, and threw his first touchdown against Mississippi State, but that was not the game winner. Actually, Mississippi State countered and scored the game-winning touchdown right in front of me. I can't think of the tight end, Kendall Watkins, who played in the NFL, caught a touchdown pass for Mississippi State that beat Tennessee in Starkville in 94, but it was Peyton Manning's first significant game action, first touchdown pass, and Mississippi State won it. The tight end caught the ball right in front of me in the back end line of the end zone. Ole Miss, Mississippi State played a great game in 95. Saw Tim Couch play quite a bit at Kentucky. Went to the 98 SEC championship game, covered Tennessee, Mississippi State when the Vols were down 4 points in the fourth quarter before Peerless Price and T. Martin went off. And Al Wilson, I believe, had a big play in that game that spurred the fourth quarter comeback that Tennessee needed to win the SEC championship and play in the first BCS championship game. That game at the Georgia Dome. Covered a few bowl games, Peach Bowls, Cotton Bowls at Mississippi State, Alabama. Remember Peyton Manning playing a game against Ole Miss. Of course, there was much controversy at that time. It's a foregone conclusion now, but Peyton Manning, of course, choosing this before his brother Eli, of course, choosing Tennessee over Ole Miss, and Peyton Manning's first game versus Ole Miss was kind of a big deal in those parts at the Liberty Bowl in Memphis, and talked to Peyton Manning after that game. Biggest games I've been to. So that's what I'm coming up with off the top of my head. I'm sure there's something else out there that I'm missing. So most of my concentration of coverage as a professional in front of the camera was in the SEC during those times. So a lot of great players, great teams. Obviously, the SEC was on its game in the mid to late 90s on into the early 2000s when I was there. So thanks for the question there, 19 Savage. Appreciate that. And not seeing anything else right there. So appreciate you guys joining on the live stream and hope you enjoyed the conversation that is with Gerry Dinardo from the Big Ten Network. All right. I may be back later today with Steve Merrill odds maker with Pro Sports Info to discuss the Heisman race and the national championship odds. Also looking forward to cutting my video on the top 10 non-conference games for 2018. The LSU quarterback situation as well. I've had those notes on hand for quite some time. So this is me committing to actually knocking that out this weekend. Appreciate you guys. Please subscribe and let your college football friends and family know that I'm here and we're trying to build something big. So I appreciate all the support. You guys are awesome. And we will see you soon right here on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.